Jim, I have another question here sent to CourtneyDriveThru at gmail.com from John Fell in Baltimore.
Boy, are you earning extra money for the holidays now? All the bribers are on the list today.
Hey guys, had Buddy Rogers not had a heart attack, do you think Vince Sr. would or could have turned him babyface? McMahon built his territory on hero champions. Do you think Buddy could have filled that role?
Oh God, yes. And John, I'm not going to chastise you because unless you, but he certainly John has read the Tim Hornbaker book on Buddy Rogers. And in there, it plainly and concisely states Rogers was a babyface in various places at various times when he would go in and out of territories in the 50s. And oftentimes, he would actually worked a few-week program. I can't remember who the particulars were, but he worked a few-week program in Memphis as a babyface partner against a couple of heels. If he was a special attraction and would go in like that, a lot of times he would be the babyface because it was like you're bringing in one of the biggest nationally known wrestlers of the time. It'd be like if we brought in The Undertaker and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, for fuck's sake. Whether he'd been a heel or not, people are still going to go apeshit about it. And where Rogers was established in a territory, if he was booking or, he liked being a heel better. And when he was defending a championship of any kind, he was usually a heel because that way he could do one of his patented, finishes where he'd take a bump out of the ring and be injured and get counted out, not lose the belt, but not be pinned, that type of thing. That was easier as a heel. But if he went somewhere as an attraction or a tag team partner, a lot of the times until the late 50s, when he was pretty much established, he would be a babyface in certain places. And obviously, he never got the NWA title until Thez was finished with it. So once he was the champion, even still, there were places that was like Flair. He got kind of an early Flair-like reaction where people went to see him when he came to town because it was him, not even necessarily because he was the champion. But he was and he was like Flair also in that he liked being a heel better and was probably better and more revolutionary at it, but he was so charismatic he could be a babyface if he needed to be. So the question was, at some point, if Rogers had stayed in the Northeast, he would have, don't you think, Brian, just by the natural scheme of things, the hottest heel in a territory for several years in a row almost always switches babyface, and then the new heel has a money run with that new babyface.
I don't know, because I think specific to the territory and the time, nothing was going to outrun the popularity of Bruno Sammartino.
Right.
And behind the scenes, Bruno and Buddy couldn't get along or work together. So then you're keeping Buddy as a heel with some fans until a full babyface turn. If he's not going to be able to team up with Bruno, so that's a separate thing on the card where it's Buddy and probably one of his friends.
Right.
Buddy and Billy Darnell against Johnny Barend and whoever Buddy gets along with this week. It would be tough there. Like Los Angeles, Freddie Blassie was able to do that.
He was all alone.
Where he was the top heel and then he turned babyface because he was such a great heel. We love him. I don't know if it would have worked exactly the same way in the Northeast for Buddy Rogers.
Well, but by the same token, if Rogers had the heart attack when Bruno was first winning the belt, with Rogers being as smart as he was, if he had been in perfect health, they would have had rematches that would have drawn big money in a variety of places up there. And maybe he could have somehow politicked his way into Bruno's heart. And they would have rematched for probably close to a year with the size of that territory. Then would Buddy have gone to, provided he also hadn't tried to maybe lay plans to steal the territory and Vince Sr. was still happy with him, would he have gone to Vince and said, well, if Bruno's main event in the Garden, I could be the main event in Baltimore. and you could keep us on mostly opposite shows, except for maybe the biggest ones. And then, golly, we could be a super team for a stadium event. That type of where he was still in the mix, even though Bruno was the guy. That was Rogers' specialty.
The bigger question that fans talk about a lot more in like the last 20 years or so since the Billy Graham DVD was, what if Billy Graham had turned babyface? Heyman's talked about it too.
Yeah.
What if, instead of Backlund coming in and getting a year push, and people lie about this or pretend it wasn't it, Backlund was super over, at least for the first few years. But if Billy Graham had turned on the Grand Wizard, or if they had turned on him, but if you had had that moment of finally seeing him hit the other heels,
yeah,
and let the fans react to a babyface Billy Graham, it's pretty amazing to think what that could have been for at least a year or two.
Oh, he would have easily gotten longer as a babyface than he'd had as a heel.
Well, the question's more about his mentality and his health than anything else.
But think about that.
Does he have the meltdown if he loses the belt?
He wouldn't have had the meltdown. If he was doing as good as he was doing until the end of his title run, and it was never going to end, and he was going to be switched babyface, where truthfully and honestly, Graham could have got away with doing a lot less in the ring by being a babyface because he could have sold more, and he wasn't a big bumper. I'm talking selling with his face. He could have got another couple of years as champion, and because he didn't really... I mean, he wasn't as good as he was in his youth by that point, but he wasn't nearly as bad physically as he would be a few years later. Does that make any sense?